Thank you. I think I'll start by just giving a little story. I grew up in Eastern Kenya and in a small farm, and it was a very dry place. We were not getting enough food all the time. And like any other family, we wanted to make more money from farming so that we can have school fees and all the other expenses that you need at home. At one time, we got an agricultural officer come to our farm, and he said, he brought a sophisticated tin of seed and told my mother, plant these, they're going to make you rich. And so we planted, we watered the crops, and in about 4 months, we had a very good harvest of something I didn't know, which was watermelon. We called the extension agent, and he came, and he told us there was no market. So what could we do? Do we roast the watermelon? Do we boil it? Or what do we do with it? So the watermelon became our breakfast, it became a dinner and a delicacy for our animals. That's why I don't like to eat melon. And this story, the story of food loss doesn't have to be our story. In the last 4 or 5 years, I've been privileged to work at the Rockefeller Foundation, the Yield-Wise Initiative, where we have tested what we call the Yield-Wise model, where we are looking at market aggregation and training of farmers and technologies. And one of the key learnings that we have picked from the Yield-Wise Initiative is that we need end-to-end solutions, and therefore we must focus on food systems. And I want to give an example of the mango farmers. When we reduced losses that Roy talked about yesterday, then we ended up having a problem. There was no enough market, and the prices really came down. And so what is it that we are doing? And that's why it's important for us to look at a systems approach. We're working with the Kenyan government to establish a pest-free zone in one of the counties, and we hope in 2 years' time we should be able to have sufficient data for us to convince the government to lift the export ban that we have, a self-export ban, and maybe we'll have the sweet mangoes come to the Vatican. So to the question on what needs to really happen next, and here we have some telepathy. The rabbi actually talked about one of the examples that I was going to talk about, that nevertheless, I had already prepared for this. We can pick one lesson from the book of Genesis and 41. And this is a story of where Pharaoh, the king, had a dream that disturbed him. He saw 7 fat cows, and after that there were 7 thin cows. And he called Joseph to come and interpret the dream. And Joseph told him that the 7 years, the 7 cows that you saw were good years, and the 7 thin cows you saw were very bad years. So he advised him, choose a wise man and put him in charge of collection of all the food during those good years, so that when the worst years come, then you're not going to be hungry. And so Pharaoh actually chose Joseph to collect the food and store it up. And I believe that was the first national grain reserve in Egypt. So I want to highlight 3 points. So the first one is King Pharaoh did something about the problem. When I look at what we have strategies in Africa and other places. We just need to get something done. And I want to give you an example of a country which I believe has the lowest post-harvest loss in the world. And this country records only 0.5% grain losses compared to 20% worldwide. Which country is this? This is a country we all know, it's Israel. Israel is a world producer of many commodities, and just to give an example, the tomato yield is 300 metric tons per hectare compared to 50 metric tons per hectare. And how did the Israelites, or in Israel, how did they transform their system to achieve 0.5 grain loss? A couple of things that I have picked from one of the most recent paper that has been commissioned by AGRA and Tony Blair Institute. One was strong leadership and government commitments to agriculture. They actually at one time allocated more than 30%. Effective government, innovative approach, farmer organization, market-led opportunities. And they have something which is very interesting, which is called the Golden Triangle. And this is a relationship and mutual accountability between researchers, extension agents, and farmers. And this has really been the driver of growth in agriculture in Israel. And we also saw this model working very well in the Netherlands. So as we are thinking about how do we align our research and investment, the golden triangle is all something that we can learn about. My second point I want to re-emphasize is around the role of the private sector. At the Yield-Wise Initiative, one of our key learning or observation was 90% of the produce which was aggregated was actually sold to SMEs. We tested the large buyers, multinational, but the SMEs are the ones who actually collected and bought a lot of produce. And this is really reaffirming yesterday's discussion around the hidden middle. However, the hidden middle lacks financing, and it's considered to be too large by the microfinancing institutions and yet also too small for the bank. So one of the questions as we think about this hidden middle, who is going to finance them? As we transition at the Rockefeller Foundation, our work on protective foods in East Africa will facilitate SMEs to improve their supply chain efficiencies to deliver more nutritious foods to the consumer. So the foundation, we are not blind to this, and I think the hidden middle is actually not hidden in us, and we're going to be working with those. And I want to highlight some interesting data from the SOFA report that a shift in diet towards a more plant-based product is estimated to boost the national supply by 28 to 36%, and actually to reduce post-harvest loss and waste by 7 to 14%. So through, of course, our intervention in plant-based product, we are going to also be contributing towards food loss. My third point is around knowledge and technology. At the Yield-Wise Initiative, we tested many technologies. I will not go into them, but our key observation was low-cost technologies are the ones which were easily adopted by farmers. And the point I want to make here is universities and research institutions should be key partners in reducing post-harvest losses, and they are actually a hub of innovations, but they need to take technologies from what I call from the lab to the land. And I want to give an example. Why is it important? 3 years ago, when we were designing a collapsible crate for tomatoes in Nigeria, we visited a research institution in northern Nigeria just to see whether they would help us design a collapsible crate. And the researcher went to a dusty store and removed a wooden collapsible crate that had been designed in 1970, but it was still in the lab. So there is a lot of research which is coming out from researchers, but it doesn't get to the farmers. And shortly before passing away in September 2009, Norman Borlaug, the father of Green Revolution, famously implored the world to take it to the farmer. What an incredible call of action. Today, Borlaug's vision is as strong as it was 10 years ago. So let's take the technologies to the farmers. And in closing, I will say that we have an opportunity to make a difference for Pharaoh in Egypt. It was a 7-year window. And for us, we have more than 7 years left to meet the target of reducing post-harvest losses by 50%. The Rockefeller Foundation, we have planted a seed, and we believe there is a great momentum for all of us to continue watering the seed. Thank you so much.